the United Kingdom of Labrador and Newfoundland. By 1917, the Great War had pulled Canada to its breaking point. Corruption, anti-war sentiments, inflation, the rising cost of living, fears of a leftist uprising like that which had overtaken Russia, and the horrific loss of Canadian lives on the front lines were slowly tearing at the fabric of Canadian society. Refusing to continue being dragged down by the rest of the country, Quebec declared independence, claiming New Brunswick and Nova Scotia as its own possessions, and bringing them under occupation, driving several non-French Canadians to flee to Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland in the process. Quebec and Ontario would soon find themselves locked in a war for the preservation or division of Canada. With so much chaos going on next door but not powerful enough to intervene militarily, the neighboring British Dominion of Labrador felt it necessary to annex the islands where several Canadian refugees had fled and act as their guardian while the European War and Canadian Civil War raged on. Fearing that Britain would not intervene anytime soon, Labrador would declare itself an independent kingdom and assume all responsibilities for its own governance. 1 decade later, following an American intervention in Canada and a referendum in Quebec to reunite with the French mainland, the Kingdom of Newfoundland and Labrador stands as one of the 2 sovereign states in post-collapse Canada, the other being the Dominion of Ontario, an anti-Quebec, anti-American state which still holds loyalties to Britain. The Vandal Kingdom. Having survived the conquests of Roman general Belisarius, the Germanic Vandals are able to solidify their hold over North Africa, successfully establishing a permanent state. The largely Catholic kingdom would become a powerful buffer against the Arab incursions in North Africa, preventing the Muslim conquest of Iberia and preserving Visigothic Spain, with whom the Vandals would become a close ally, cooperating with each other against their neighboring Byzantine, Frankish, and Arab rivals in hopes of achieving dominance in the Mediterranean. The United Kongzi Republic of Borneo. During the 18th century, the Sultans of Borneo had encouraged Chinese immigration, especially from those of Hakka descent, on account of their reputation as good gold miners. The Chinese immigrants organized themselves into Kongzis, or corporations, to better manage mining operations. However, these corporations often found themselves in competition with one another, causing violence to spring up, which the sultans largely disregarded since gold output remained high or even increased as competitiveness grew between the corporations. However, by 1777, the sultans had lost significant power to the colonizing Dutch, and the corporations were driven to put aside their differences to secure their own existence, coming together to establish the United Kongzi Republic. After a series of wars with the Dutch, the Republic would emerge victorious and occupy the whole of Borneo. As it stood strategically located between British, French, Spanish, and Dutch colonies and had already succeeded in fending off European conquest once, the Great Powers decided to leave the Kongzi Republic as a neutral zone with whom all its neighbors could conduct trade, much as had become the case for Thailand. The Republic would soon gain additional leverage in its negotiations and begin generating a significant profit from its role as a trade hub, building an impressive merchant and naval fleet which by the late 19th century made of it a great power in the Pacific, rivaling even China and Japan. The Kaiser Reich of Texas. The Kaiser Reich was formed in the interwar period following the exile of Kaiser Wilhelm II. Rising discontent during the Great Depression would fuel Texan separatism to the point of secession, but with an angry American populace and an unpaid army, the US was in no shape to put the rebellion down, allowing Texas to gain sovereignty in what was known as the Great Cowboy War, during which Wilhelm declared himself King of the Cowboys by jamming a pickelhaube through a cowboy hat. He would be sworn in following his grilling of the perfect burger, gaining in addition to the title of Kaiser of Texas, the subtitle of Texan Burgermeister. Nova Caretania. In 1883, the Austro-Hungarian Duchy of Carniola, along with the County of Istra and Free City of Trieste, broke away following a surge of Slovene nationalism, surviving by pitting the larger powers of Italy and Austro-Hungary against each other, both of whom hoped to annex the breakaway state for themselves. The state, now known as Nova Caretania, would settle into the role of an autonomous Austrian proxy, largely supporting their national agenda and even siding with them in the conflict against Serbia, which ultimately became the Great War. As the conflict escalated and Austro-Caretanian forces made a significant advance into Italian lands, so would the breakaway state switch sides on the agreement of keeping its captured lands as well as acquiring desired territories from Austria post-war, emerging from the conflict as the leading power of the Adriatic Sea, though one viewed with much disdain by its neighbors. The Southern Union. Following the American loss in Vietnam and with the rising threat of communism in Asia and Africa, the Commonwealth states of Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand came together in union to deter the expansion of communism across the Indian Ocean and South Pacific. For the remainder of the Cold War, the Union would proceed to take an active military stance against communist movements in Mozambique, Angola, Rhodesia, Laos, Cambodia, India, and Malaysia, working in tandem with the establishment governments to drive these nations closer to the Western Bloc. Metropole. In preparation for an oncoming nuclear war, the French government established a series of vaults to preserve enough of the population to repopulate the country post-war. However, only the Vault of Paris had survived. The Paris Vault would go on to create Metropole, a mega-city which expanded the vault above ground and became capable of housing a population of 1 million by the year 2100. Metropole enforces a strict hierarchy with leaders and intellectuals at the top, soldiers and security men below them, skilled craftsmen below them, and simple laborers at the very bottom. Metropole believes that it stands as the last best hope for civilization upon the European continent, but little does it know that across nearly all the former countries of Europe, similar megafortresses are rising and slowly expanding their settlements by making surrounding lands farmable again, bringing forth a new feudal age. Ridge Wallet. The history of the Ridge Wallet is an interesting one, however we only need observe this non-country entity in the present to recognize that when compared to its historical predecessors, it has certainly come a long way in strength and efficiency. Having built virtually indestructible RFID blocking metal walls capable of protecting its treasures and secrets from both hackers and bullets. Even despite being only half the size of its historical predecessor, significant technological advancement has allowed Ridgewall to comfortably house just as many if not more assets within its borders, and if that's not enough, it's a highly sought vacation destination for living impaired American presidents. You too can experience Ridgewall by visiting ridge.com/MonsieurZ and using promo code MonsieurZ at checkout for a special discount. Bolgoslavia. During the Greek War of Independence, the Allied powers of Great Britain, France, and Russia put their own ambitions aside for the sake of weakening the foreign Ottoman Empire's hold upon the continent. The Russians, given their proximity, shared Orthodox faith, and Slavic relation to much of the Balkans, would be especially invested in expelling the Ottomans, hoping to establish several Orthodox states loyal to Russia. Britain and France, however, pursued unity of the Balkans into a single empire, one which would not be so easily influenced by Russia and which could be of greater use to the West. With Constantinople as its capital and holding firm access to the Atlantic, Mediterranean, Ionian, Aegean, and Black Seas, the Balkan Empire would be primed to become one of Europe's leading powers, surpassing the emerging Italy and becoming an equal to Austria and Russia. New Byzantium. In 1385, John V of the Byzantine Empire was successfully able to maintain the independence of Constantinople after gaining the support of the Catholic Church. Although the religious schism did continue, this act of Christian unity helped improve relations between the Eastern and Western churches, encouraging further cooperation throughout the years. The Ottoman invasion of 1456 would prove overwhelming, however, and force the emperor to flee to Georgia, where he and his descendants resided until the year 1522, when they were able to successfully take Crimea, turning it into a new Constantinople where trade blossomed. A personal and later political union between the Byzantine and Georgian royal houses would allow for the preservation of Byzantium as a transplanted state. It wouldn't be until the end of the Great War that Byzantium was able to retake its old capital, along with various other former Byzantine territories under Ottoman occupation. The Russian Civil War would open up additional opportunities for Byzantium to expand its hold over the Caucasus as well, further receiving for its crucial role in the Great War and Russian Civil War shared ownership of the Egyptian coast along the Red Sea, Britain grooming the emerging empire to become a valuable ally in the far Mediterranean. Hashemite Arabia. During the Saudis' attempted conquest of the Hejaz, Abdullah I, the king of Transjordan, marched south to confront the Saudi army and turn the tides of battle with his more experienced forces. Seeing the opportunity to take matters into his own hands and secure the Arabian dynasty promised to his family by Britain, he would proceed to put the Saudis on the defensive before ultimately conquering their lands, nearly taking the whole of Arabia. Post-war, the newly conquered lands would be reorganized into the Hashemite Arabian kingdom based out of its capital in Mecca. The later establishment of Israel and subsequent Arab-Israeli wars would lead more isolated Arab states like Iraq and Palestine to join the Arabian Kingdom. The Greater Polish Republic. In 1926, Marshal Joseph Pilsudski's attempted overthrow of the government of Poland failed, allowing the National Democracy faction to stay in power and guide Poland down the path of capitalistic economics and territorial expansion, annexing Lithuania while building an alliance with France against Germany, who would have been treated as a greater threat than the Soviets in the East. When Germany ultimately attempted to invade Poland in 1939, the Poles would turn the tables on Germany, annexing their possessions in Silesia and eastern portions of Prussia. The Alaskan Empire. In a world where the United States teamed up with the French Canadians to win the War of 1812, the United Kingdom is only left with part of the Hudson Bay Colony and Northwestern Territory. Still in debt from the Napoleonic Wars, the British sell the colony to Russia in the late 1830s. This massive purchase leads Russia to invest more heavily in the Americas and in its navy, turning Alaska into a proper colonial territory instead of a largely underdeveloped possession. When the Russian Civil War ultimately breaks out, remaining white forces driven far from the industrialized West concentrate themselves within Russian America where they hope to regroup, but ultimately find themselves unable to regain footing on Eurasia, while the Red forces are unable to invade North America, allowing the Tsarist Alaskan state or the Alaskan Empire to rise from the ashes of the former colony. The Celtic Empire. The Celtic tribes who had long occupied the lands of northwestern Europe now found themselves threatened by the expanding Roman Empire to the south and the more savage German tribes to the east. Seeing their future as one of either unity or destruction, the Celts came together under the guidance of a supreme chief, or Brennus, under whom they would repel the Romans then on the brink of civil war, before launching a preemptive invasion of Germania and over the course of decades forcing the Germans deeper into Slavic and Scythian lands. The new empire would encompass the whole of Gaul, the British Isles, the Alps, Germania, Corsica, and portions of Iberia. The Xin Dynasty. In 1915, Yuan Shikai proclaimed himself Emperor of China. As emperor, and upon his successful stabilization of the country with foreign support, he sought to rapidly gain the admiration of the Chinese people, whom he feared might perceive him as a foreign pawn. He found his opportunity to achieve this goal upon the outbreak of the Russian Civil War, during which time his Chinese armies turned their focus northward, capturing Mongolia and the Russian Far East. This intervention against Russia, a European power, while working alongside other major European powers, would have earned Yuan respect from both his people and from the international community, encouraging China to forge closer political relations with Britain and France as an eastern check against Soviet expansion, while China and Weimar Germany became close trade partners, helping the Chinese to industrialize and become all the more formidable by the time of the Sino-Japanese War, when the Chinese would repel a Japanese invasion, capturing their Korean and Taiwanese colonies in the process. The US of Z thanks you for watching. Special thanks to everyone who submitted a scenario. Support your legion by liking the video, or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z,